today we are going to learn how to create this image that you can see right here. It's a simple tutorial. We'll go into some modeling concepts, some materials, and some lighting. But yeah, it's a pretty simple tutorial for intermediate people. So let's go ahead and get started. So I've got a basic scene loaded up here in Blender already. A simple backdrop and some palm trees. Now, you can find these palm trees on BlendSwap if you are interested. They are right here. This is from, who's this from? BMF. All right. So this is the palm tree that I used, free to grab on BlendSwap. So once you got those loaded into the scene, a simple backdrop is easy to make. Just extrude a plane and just take it up and add in a subsurf to it to smooth it out. Okay, so now that we've got the basics loaded up, let's go ahead and load in a jar. So how to get started with a jar. Pretty basic. I'm not even going to use a reference image. We're just going to go with a circle here. And under the settings, I'm just going to add just a little more vertices. All right. And then we're going to go into edit mode. We're going to extrude it along the Z axis to about there. Okay. And then we're going to extrude it a little bit more. We're going to start scaling it in like that. And then we're going to start scaling it out again. Oops, messed up on that one. Scale it out and create that circular looking top. Okay. I'll start to come back in here a little bit. It's very tedious work, but this is how I made that jar. Okay, we'll do it one more time, just like that. Okay, now we need to come down into the jar, and we'll start scaling back out, just like that. So it creates a top. All right. So that is a basic jar in Blender. So you can see we have some very sharp edges, and it's also a paper thin jar right now. So one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to add some thickness to it. So modifier solidify, and we're going to choose even thickness. So the whole mesh is getting the same amount of thickness. And we're just going to go about there. Okay. Then we're going to select this top row here. And whoops, gonna Alt and click on the top ring so we can select all that. I'm gonna go into edge mode here, and if we right click, we can bevel the edges, so that will add in a better smooth top instead of a razor thin top like we just had. Okay, and then you can see right here is pretty sharp too. So Alt and click on there, and we can bevel that off a little bit there. And maybe this one as well. So you just get a nice smooth edge, just like that. Okay, and we'll add back in that solidifier. We'll add in edge split modifier and a subdivision subsurface. Now we'll also right click and shade smooth, just like that. All right, so that's a basic jar in Blender. I'll scale it down just a little bit, and I'll scale it up so it looks more like a jar, just like that. Okay, scale that down a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with the water part of the image. So what I did for that was just a cylinder. You can also add in more vertices to this as well. I'm going to go tab edit mode, GZ1. It's make that origin point there at the bottom, so that helps for scaling easily into the jar. And then however full you want the jar to be of water is how much you'll make, or what the height you'll make of that. And since we left the jar right in the center of the world origin, this automatically puts this into the jar. Okay, very cool. Now let's just scale it down a little bit so it's not right. I mean, water is technically, yes, right up against the glass, but we don't want any weird intersections happening in the render. So just scale that down just a little bit. Okay. Okay. So now what we need to do is we actually have to get rid of the top. So to get the tiny little waves that you might have seen in the render there's tiny little waves on the top surface of that. But the mesh needs data for that to actually happen. Now you could add in a circle and extrude it up, or you can do what we're about to do and take this top off. So delete the face of that. Okay, so now we have just the open-ended cylinder here. And then what we're going to do here, let's scale that down just a little bit. Okay, there we go. We'll grab this here. We'll hit E to extrude it. And then click and let go. And we're going to scale this in just like that. Okay, so now I think you can see what we're about to do. We're going to meet in the center. Okay, so this is going to take a little bit. This is where it's kind of tedious, but we need the geometry. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward this part because this is boring. But yeah, just basically keep extruding, try and make it the same every time. You can see I'm not very good at doing that, but it doesn't have to be perfect either. Just keep extruding because we just need this geometry for the tiny little waves that we're gonna add in to the surface there. Okay, so I'm just finishing up the last part of it here, and really once you really get to the center, it's not really gonna make much difference because our island thing is going right here, so you're not gonna see this hole. But what we need is all this geometry, all this data. Okay, so we're gonna need it on the sides here, tiny little waves on the side here. So I'm just gonna loop cut and add in more cuts here. So your cylinder should basically look like this now inside the jar. Very, very cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and add in the island right now. So we're gonna add in a cube, and this is how to make a quick and dirty rock type of shape in Blender. So we're gonna also GZ1 in edit mode to make the origin scalable from the base right there. Okay. Now how to make a rock is a subdivision subsurface. Okay, and we'll turn that all the way up to there, and then we'll add in a displacement. Check new displacement texture, and then let's go to the textures and add in clouds. All right, so now we turn this size up, you can start to see the formation of a rock coming in. Okay, to get more detailed geometry, we'll turn up the depth there. I like to always go to about 10. You can see it works pretty well. All right, we're gonna shade smooth again. And yeah, basically you can go with whatever kind of rock. There's a bunch of different kinds here. You get some interesting looking ones. I'm just gonna go with a simple basic one. All right, now we'll go ahead and scale that down. Let's take a look at it here. I'm gonna actually kind of flatten it out here because we want more of a surface that's kind of like walkable, if that makes sense. Kind of just want to flatten it out there, so I'll probably hop into sculpting mode here real quick. Kind of flatten it out, maybe smooth it out here as well. Let me turn off mirroring, turn down the strength. Okay, you know what I actually did wrong? Is a learning moment for me. You have to actually apply that this is going to be the shape that we're going to use. So we need to apply both of those. Now we can go into sculpt mode and actually sculpt this out here. Okay. So let's go back to the flatten brush and kind of just make a surface area here that's kind of walkable, believable to be like an island beach type area. It's really what we're going for. Okay. Okay. Let's kind of flatten it up here. And don't worry about losing geometry, because this is all like flat and smooth now. We'll have a bump map for our texture, so don't worry about that. Okay. Okay, so back in object mode here, you can see that this is pretty much the base that we're going to have. I'm going to hide this jar so we can see a little bit better here. Okay, so that's pretty much how it looks. I forgot to shade smooth on the water there, so go ahead and do that. And then we're going to add in a subdivision as well to help that look even better. Okay. So now with this rock, I'm just going to flatten it out a little bit more and bring it to about right there. Okay. Now I'm going to hop into Control Tab. I'm going to hop into weight paint mode. And I'm going to paint where I want the trees to be. Okay. So if you saw in the render, it wasn't all completely perfect. There was kind of like this sand beach area over here that had a couple of them, but for the most part they were kind of surrounding it. So that's kind of what I'm trying to replicate here. I'm going to turn down the weight and maybe get some randoms in here. Okay. That way it's randomized enough to be nature based. Okay, so let's go ahead and add in these trees now. So once you have them in Blender, we're going to go ahead and select both of them and Control G. And you can name this if you want. I'm just going to call it palm trees. Okay. And I'm going to name this one short tree. And this one's going to be tall tree. And literally the way that I got that is SZ. And you can kind of manipulate how these look. It's just better to have a random variation of palm trees. It always looks better for nature when it's randomized. Alright. So I'm going to go to the particle system settings. I'm going to change the type to hair. Check advanced. And we're going to go and open up the vertex groups, the render panel, the physics, and the velocity. So we're going to render as a collection, and we're going to choose the palm trees. And you can see that the scale is way too big, so you can turn that down there. Okay, I'm going to turn it down and hold shift at the same time. Okay. So first of all, we have way too many. I think I only had a couple hundred in my final. If that, we might actually turn that down even more. I'm going to change it to the group that we set. Now, we don't want them bending around the rock like they are right now. So this is always an interesting one to try and redo. But if you mess around here in the velocity with the z direction, so the particles are pointing straight up, and then you mess with the scale, that's when you'll be able to get them pretty much straight up and down like that. Okay? So that's pretty much how that works. Okay. Right. So let's play with the seed here a little bit. Okay, there we go. So I'm looking for 2 trees in kind of that shallow density area. I'm looking for 2 trees to add in that little hammock. So all the way off here to the side, I've been hiding a little hammock that I've made. And it's not it's not anything special in how it looks. It's literally just a plane that's been extruded and has been smoothed out by a subdivision surface. And we're just going to make it go right up in here. Scale that down a little bit. Like so. We're just giving the illusion of a little hammock. It adds that little bit of funny realism or whatever to the shot. And this floating above it is kind of just a little spotlight. I just parented it to the hammock, so it just has a little bit of that. Now I did have a material set up for it, but since I've changed computers so many times, it can't find the texture setup for anything. So what we're gonna do, I'm just gonna leave it on a principled shader, which is default for everyone. And you can just make this a nice red again if you want. I would turn down the specularity so it's not too much. Maybe turn up the roughness. Something like that. Okay. I'm just going to change my view amount so I can get in closer here. So we're getting really close and personal with this. Alright. So yeah, I wouldn't want you to spend a lot of time on this, but this just helps kind of add in that funny little realism. There's a little hammock there. It's kind of funny. Okay, so as far as modeling everything, I think that is pretty much it. So let's go ahead and work on the materials next. So the materials for the island rock, they're pretty basic. You can get any kind of texture you want to fulfill whatever kind of look you're going for. I'm looking for more of a grassy rock type of environment, and then I'm going to kind of paint on here where I want the sand to be, or kind of just tell Blender where I want the sand to be. So I'm going to kind of mix the two together. So I've got these grass textures from Polygon. I use Polygon for all of our textures. Again, you can use whatever kind of textures you want. That'll work just as well. So this is kind of, if you want to follow along using Polygon textures, this is kind of the node setup that I normally do for textures. It works pretty well. We've got the color map and the AO map multiplied together for the base color, and make sure that's non-color. Then we got a reflection map for the specularity and a gloss map for the roughness. Both of those connected to multiply math nodes. So just change the type to multiply, and then this will increase the specularity, and this will increase or decrease the roughness. And then we just plug in a basic normal map to a normal map, and then normal to normal. So it's pretty basic. You just kind of put all of them together and you'll get a pretty good texture. All right. So how to mix the two? I know there's texture painting. I'm not really going to go into that right now. a very basic way of doing it is just going into edit mode. And since we've already applied the rock when we went into sculpting, we can hit C to bring up this little brush thing here. And then we can kind of just paint in here. It's a type of painting. How we want the sand to come into the scene here. So I'll want a lot right up here in the front, and then we can kind of go back into the back here. It's really your preference, and if you hit the middle mouse button, that'll delete it. So then what we can do is come over back to the sand material that is already created. If we, my apologies, my computer is being very, very slow right now. I don't know why. There we go. Okay, so if we go to sand and check assign, that area will have the sand texture assigned to it. Okay, so if we go into material view here, which is probably going to take a second, bear with my computer. We should be able to see how this starts to look. Now, nothing is UV unwrapped yet, so we'll get into that here in a second. Okay, you can see here, for the most part, it's coming in pretty well. Okay, everything is very largely scaled, so we can actually see the individual particles of the sand. So we'll have to turn that down. So if we just open up another window here and change this to the UV editor, we can take everything now, the whole mesh, and select it all, and just go ahead and scale it way up there. Maybe like scale it up to like 13 or 14. Maybe around in there, something like that. Just give it that basic scaled up look. Okay, cool. All right, I like it. It's coming along quite nicely. Very, very cool. Okay, so now for the water right here. You remember in a past tutorial when we created the ocean shader? I'll just reopen it for you for anyone that didn't see that tutorial. This is the basic water shader setup that I procedurally made here in the studio. So we've got a basic glass and translucency mixed together with subsurface scattering, mixed together again to a final surface output. And then I actually gave some density and volume, both volume absorption and scatter, into an add shader, and we plug that into the volume. Now if we want any additional bump, that's where this node group comes in, which is literally just a Voronoi texture multiplied to an add node, and this will increase or decrease the amount of bump. That's just the basic shader there. Okay, so that's how we made the water there. So I'm gonna hit Alt H and bring back our jar, and this is going to also be a very basic material. It's just going to be glass, and we'll change the roughness to about 0.1, change the IOR to about a 1.3. Okay, let's go ahead and save it before we start to do any render tests. And let's go into rendered view mode now, since we saved it. And there we go. Awesome. Okay, now we don't have any lighting set up right now, so don't worry, it's gonna look better here in a sec. So speaking of lighting, let's go ahead and grab in an HDR of some kind. So I'm gonna delete that point light, and I'm going to replace that with an environment texture. So let's see here, my skies here. So most of these are from hdrihaven.com, so go ahead and head on over there for free awesome HDRs. So we could choose any kind here, maybe a sunset, maybe midday, It's whatever we're looking for here. Let's try a sunset. Let's go ahead and open that up. Now let's set up the camera as well. So in front view here, I'm gonna get snapped right into view. Control Alt number pad 0. Okay. And then let's make a little more room. I think we're pretty much done with materials at this point. And I'm going to do more of a portrait render. I think that'll work a little better. I'm gonna come up a little bit more, rotate down. I'm gonna zoom in like, whoop, like that. Okay. Let's bring that down there. Cool. Now I'm going to set the depth of field here to in the middle of the jar there, about there. That'd be pretty good. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at everything right now. I'm just going to use film look here at very high contrast. I think that worked well for the original scene that I did. I don't know, we're kind of still messing with some details. Maybe changing it up a little bit if we want. Okay. I think the HDR looks pretty good. We can turn that down though to like a 0.3 or something. Yeah. It's not half bad. Very cool. And a little more samples so we can really see it start to come into play here. And yeah, that might actually look better than my original. Anyway, yeah, that's pretty much the basic concept, everyone. There's not really much else I could tell you to do other than taking it into Photoshop or something else and just kind of adding a little bit more flair to it. Or you can take it into the Blender compositor. But yeah, that is pretty much how I made that scene. I think I'm going to do more of these type of renders, these little small worlds. It's a cool concept and they're really fun to make. And yeah, so I think that's pretty much the end of the tutorial. Thank you everyone who tuned in to watch. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. And I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.